On Christmas morning, my daughter asked why every cousin had gifts except her. The room went still until my sister smirked and said, "Maybe Santa skips kids who don't fit in." Everyone laughed like it was harmless. I watched Lila fold into herself, clutching the little drawing she made for Grandma, and something in me snapped so quietly, no one even noticed. I walked into the kitchen, took out my phone, and made one call steady, calm, final. 4 days later, what showed up in their driveway didn't just make them scream, it made them question everything they thought they controlled. My name is Mila, and for most of my life, I kept telling myself that my family wasn't as cold as they seemed, that maybe I was too sensitive, too hopeful, too willing to fill in the blanks they left empty. Every holiday I showed up with gifts wrapped neatly, desserts made from recipes my mother once loved, and a quiet wish that this time might be different. I work in finance, raised my 2 kids on my own, and still tried to give my parents the version of me they preferred, useful, agreeable, silent. Driving to their house that morning, the air felt sharp, the kind that stings your lungs before you even close the car door. Evan had pressed his face to the window the whole way, guessing what might be under the tree. Lila, in her red dress, held the drawing she'd made for my mother, a picture of all of us standing hand in hand in the snow. She kept smoothing the edges, like it mattered that it looked perfect. I wanted to protect that hope for as long as I could. Their house sat on a quiet street outside the city, always decorated too perfectly, always feeling colder inside than the weather outside. When we walked in, nothing felt warm. My dad was half watching the TV, swirling his morning drink like it was part of his routine. My mom hugged us the way someone hugs a stranger in public, quick, stiff looking over my shoulder. Riley acted surprised to see me, even though she'd texted me the night before asking what wine to bring, as if every interaction needed a layer of performance. I brought gifts, the kind that kept things civil. Noise-canceling headphones for my dad, a scarf my mom had once complimented in passing a drone for Riley's son, a bracelet for her daughter, a new phone for Evan. I wrapped everything with hand-tied bows because I wanted my kids to feel proud when they handed them over. That's how I was raised. Give more than you receive, and maybe you'll be tolerated. We settled into the living room, the tree glowing like it belonged to another family entirely. One by one, names were called. Evan grinned at his new phone, and Riley's kids tore into expensive gifts without looking twice at who they came from. Through it all, Lila waited, hands clasped, dress, smoothed eyes bright. I waited with her, and with every name that wasn't hers, a familiar ache rose in my chest, one I'd spent a lifetime pretending wasn't real. When the last ribbon hit the floor and her name still hadn't been called, I knew exactly what was coming next and exactly what it would cost to finally put an end to it. The moment the final gift was opened, something shifted in the room, subtle to everyone but me. Evan was busy setting up his phone. Riley's kids were comparing their new toys. My mom was already gathering wrapping paper like the morning had gone exactly as planned. But beside me, Lila sat perfectly still, her hands flat on her dress, her eyes fixed on the empty space under the tree where a gift with her name should have been. She didn't speak at first. She just kept breathing these tiny, uneven breaths like she was trying not to make a sound. Then she leaned in, her voice barely there, and whispered, "Did Santa forget me?" It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Before I could answer, before I could wrap an arm around her or say something to protect whatever was left of her little heart, Riley spoke, loudly, carelessly, as if she'd been waiting for the moment. "Maybe Santa skips kids who don't fit in," she said. Grinning legs crossed her tone, fake sweet and sharp enough to cut. And then everyone laughed. My mother laughed. My father smirked without looking up. Even Riley's boyfriend, who had met my children exactly once, chuckled like the joke had been crafted for him. Lila's drawing slipped from her lap and fluttered to the floor. She didn't move to pick it up. She just stared at her hands like she was trying to disappear into them. It wasn't the first time my family had used silence or jokes to remind me, and now my kids, that we were the outsiders in a place that claimed to be home. But watching it happen to her, it was different. It was like someone reached into an old wound inside me and tore it open again. I felt heat rise up my neck, not the kind that explodes, but the kind that calcifies into something cold. I looked around the room at people who taught me that love meant endurance, that belonging was conditional, that my job was to compensate for being inconvenient. No one even noticed how still I'd become. When I excused myself and stood, my mother said something about being dramatic again. Riley rolled her eyes. I didn't respond. I walked to the kitchen, each step steady, each breath controlled. The window above the sink looked out onto the driveway where my car sat, coated in a thin layer of frost. I stared at that frost like it was a finish line. Because in that moment, I knew two things with absolute clarity. One, I couldn't let my daughter grow up believing what I had believed, that cruelty was just another part of family tradition. And two, they needed to learn what consequences felt like. My hands didn't shake as I reached for my phone. I knew exactly what to do, exactly who to call, exactly how to cut the cord they'd been yanking for years. My parents' order, I said when the representative picked up. I need to cancel it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I just ended the call, set the phone down, and inhaled the quietest, sharpest breath of my life. Behind me, the laughter from the living room rolled on, completely unaware that something irreversible had just begun. For the rest of Christmas morning, I moved through the house like I was made of glass, quiet, reflective, impossible to read. No one sensed anything had shifted. They never did. My mother commented on the ham being a little dry this year. Riley complained about the Wi-Fi. My dad asked Evan to set up his headphones. And I sat there with Lila pressed against my side, her head resting on my arm, her little body stiff the way kids get when they don't understand why they've been singled out. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the spectacle they expected. They had taught me my whole life that loud reactions were ammunition. Silence, though, unsettled them. When we finally left, snow had begun to fall in lazy spirals soft enough that the world felt muted. I buckled the kids into their seats, kissed the top of Lila's head, and watched her hold the drawing she'd retrieved from the carpet. She folded it once, then twice, like she wasn't sure whether to keep it or throw it away. That image stayed with me long after we drove home. The next 4 days moved in a strange rhythm, normal on the surface, charged underneath. I worked my remote shifts, cooked dinner, helped Evan with homework, braided Lila's hair before bed. But beneath the routine was this quiet hum, a sense of something gathering strength. What none of them knew, not Riley, not my mother, not my father, was that the $8,000 furniture delivery they were expecting before New Year's had vanished the moment I hung up the phone. In its place, another order had been arranged, one that cost a tiny fraction of the price and carried a very different message. And because my parents never checked their emails, never tracked packages, never questioned the world they felt entitled to, they had no idea what was coming. On the 4th day, just after lunch, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "You're not going to believe what I just heard," she said, lowering her voice even though she worked in an open showroom miles away. "A truck showed up at your parents' place. They freaked out, like really freaked out." I didn't need details to picture it. Howard stepping outside in his heavy coat, expecting sleek leather furniture for their remodel. Elise standing behind him, ready to critique every stitch. And instead being greeted by a rusty metal folding chair, a flimsy plastic table, and a gold envelope placed neatly on top. Inside the envelope was the note I'd written by hand. Short, final. "You are officially cut off. Find another wallet." Signed simply, Mila. I imagined the silence before the scream, the disbelief, the insult landing deeper than they expected, the realization that the person they depended on to stay quiet had finally walked away. But that was only the beginning, because when people who thrive on control feel it slipping, they don't retreat, they regroup, they escalate. They look for new ways to pull you back into orbit. And 4 days after the driveway delivery, the retaliation began, loud, invasive, and aimed directly at the one place they thought I was weakest. My home. I knew something was coming. People like my parents don't let humiliation settle quietly. They kick the dust back into the air so no one notices where it originally came from. Still, I wasn't prepared for how quickly they moved. It started with a knock on my door, not a polite one, a pounding one, the kind that carries ownership, not concern. It was a Saturday afternoon in early January. Evan and Lila were sitting on the living room rug, half building, half arguing over a plastic castle. I was in the kitchen washing dishes, letting the warm water numb the tension in my hands when the knock hit again, harder. I wiped my fingers on a towel, already knowing. My body knew before my brain caught up. I opened the door, and there they were. My mother, wrapped in one of her beaded cardigans, like she was arriving for a brunch she'd been invited to. My father, standing beside her with his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, jaw tight. And behind them, leaning against my railing like he'd been positioned there for effect, was Jerry, my parents' neighbor, the one who smelled like cigarettes and gasoline, the one who'd been making comments about me ever since my divorce, the one my parents kept insisting was such a good man. Surprise! My mother said, her smile too bright and too tight. We thought it was time to stop the nonsense. Before I could speak, she pushed a small, wrapped gift into Lila's arms, Lila, who had walked up behind me, peeking from the doorway. My mother cooed, "See, we come in peace." But the smile didn't reach her eyes. It never does. My father didn't even look at me. He scanned my living room behind me as though checking what I had that he might use against me later. And Jerry, he grinned. "You look good, Mila," he said, though the way he said my name made my skin crawl. "Your folks told me you've been lonely. Doesn't have to be that way." I stepped forward, blocking him from seeing my kids. "I didn't invite you," I said. My mother waved a hand. "Family doesn't need an invitation. We just show up." I didn't answer. I lifted the gift from Lila's hands before she could open it. The wrapping was sloppy, the tape already peeling. Inside was a used coloring book. Corners, bent pages, missing some scribbled through as if taken from a waiting room no one cleaned often. They hadn't even bothered to check. "Is this a joke?" I asked. My mother blinked, feigning innocence. "It's the thought that counts." Behind me, I felt Evan stiffen. Lila's face crumpled, though she stayed silent, her small fingers reaching for mine. That did it. "Get out," I said. My father scoffed. "Mila, don't start." "Get out," I repeated. Not yelling, not shaking, just done. My mother stepped forward, trying to enter the house. "You're overreacting. We came to make peace." "Peace." My voice stayed calm. "Peace isn't something you deliver with a used coloring book." She bristled. "You've always been dramatic." "Out," I said, again pointing at the door. My father grabbed her arm and tugged her back. Jerry lingered, smiling like this was entertainment. I slammed the door before he could finish whatever sentence he thought I wanted to hear. I locked it, then slid down to the floor and cried for the first time since Christmas. Both kids dropped to the ground beside me. Lila wrapped her arms around my neck. Evan leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "We don't have to stay here, Mom. We can go somewhere, just for a bit." So we did. We went to the movies, bought popcorn too big for our hands. Lila fell asleep halfway through, and Evan draped his hoodie over her like a blanket. For 2 hours, life felt almost normal. But the world is never quiet for long, not when people like my parents are involved. Because someone else heard about their visit, Uncle James. He called the next morning. His voice was low, steady, and carrying a kind of disappointment that wasn't aimed at me. "Come to dinner," he said. "Next weekend. Bring the kids. Everyone will be here." "I don't want a scene," I said. "There won't be one," he replied. "Not from you." I hesitated, but he added something that stayed with me for days. "They think they're in control. They're about to find out they're not." So the next weekend I went. The moment I stepped inside his house, a warm, lived-in place with wood floors and the smell of rosemary, I felt something I hadn't felt around family in years: respect. Cousins greeted my kids. My aunt asked if Lila wanted to help frost cookies. No one asked about my divorce. No one mentioned money. It felt human. At the far end of the table sat my parents, stiff quiet, pretending none of us existed. Dinner was almost too normal. Laughter, small talk, the rattle of silverware. But under it, a tension threaded the room, subtle but unmistakable. After dessert, Uncle James stood. "I have something to show you all." He lowered the lights. A projector blinked on. The first video appeared my front porch. The day my parents and Jerry showed up, recorded by Mark, my neighbor, because Uncle James had asked him to keep an eye out. There they were, my mother trying to enter my home, my father ignoring my kids, Jerry making a comment that made my stomach twist. Then the next video loaded. Christmas morning. The room, the tree, the pile of gifts, and Lila's tiny voice. Why did everyone get gifts except me? Riley's voice followed. Clear, cruel. Maybe Santa skips kids who don't fit in. Laughter, my mother's included. When the lights came back on, no one spoke. My mother tried to stand. This is taken out of context. No, Uncle James said, his voice steady but hard. This is exactly the context. He turned to the room. We've let this go on for years. We watched Mila carry more than any daughter should. We watched them take her money, her time, her dignity, and then they punished her child for existing. Someone gasped softly. My father stared at his hands. My mother tried again. Mila exaggerates. No, James snapped. She doesn't. And you don't get to talk your way out of this. He turned to me. You don't owe them anything. Not your money, not your presence, not your silence. If they want a relationship, they can earn it. My mother stood abruptly. I won't be part of a family that gangs up on me. My father muttered fine and followed her out. The door closed. The house exhaled. But the story didn't end that night. It didn't end when they stormed out. It didn't end when Uncle James squeezed my shoulder and said, "You're not alone anymore." It didn't even end when he handed me an envelope to help me repair the damage they'd caused, because humiliation fuels people like my parents. And they were already planning their next move, one loud enough, dangerous enough, and desperate enough that even I didn't see it coming. The silence after that dinner lasted longer than I expected, long enough that part of me wondered if the message had finally gotten through. Weeks passed. No calls, no surprise visits, no gifts dropped on my porch like bait. I let myself breathe again. I focused on the kids, on rebuilding the small calm inside our house that had been shaken so many times. Then a man I didn't recognize knocked on my door and handed me an envelope. Inside was a formal notice my parents were seeking court-approved visitation rights. They weren't trying to reconcile. They were trying to regain control publicly, legally, painfully. But this time, I wasn't alone. Uncle James sat with me at the table as I read it. My lawyer reviewed every claim, every lie. We gathered payments, bills, messages, voice notes, truth organized into something unbreakable. Before the court date arrived, my parents received the full dossier. The next morning, their lawyer withdrew the petition entirely. No confrontation, no apology, just retreat. And for the first time in my life, retreat felt like victory. Summer came quiet and golden, and the kids and I spent a week at a small lakeside cabin where no one knew our names. Evan read on the porch, Lila drew chalk hearts on the gravel, and I woke each morning without bracing for impact. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Lila said softly, "Mom, I don't think Santa forgot me. I think he was waiting." I smiled, finally believing it. Some gifts arrive only after you choose yourself.